When a highly qualified Black teacher is denied a job for reasons no one can explain, she decides to take a stand. But what starts as one woman's fight for fairness uncovers a shocking pattern of discrimination that could shake an entire town. Will her courage be enough to expose the truth and force change in a system designed to keep people like her out? Margaret Caldwell's polished black shoes clicked against the linoleum floor of the school board office. She'd rehearsed this day 1,000 times in her mind, imagining herself standing in front of a classroom, introducing her students to the beauty of Shakespeare and Baldwin. Now, she clutched her portfolio, brimming with lesson plans and glowing recommendations, ready to prove her worth. Superintendent William Monroe, a middle-aged man with a neatly combed silver streak in his hair, sat behind a heavy oak desk. His office smelled faintly of tobacco, and the walls were adorned with certificates and photos of smiling students, all conspicuously white. He greeted Margaret with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Caldwell," he began, scanning her resume. "I see you have quite the background. A master's degree in English education. Impressive." Margaret nodded, suppressing her nerves. "I've been teaching for 7 years now. I believe I can make a difference here." Monroe's gaze flickered up, just briefly, before returning to the paper. Of course, he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Well, we'll be in touch." The interview was over in less than 10 minutes. As Margaret walked out of the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Days later, her suspicions were confirmed. A local newspaper announced the hire of a young, inexperienced white teacher for the position. Her heart sank. She knew what had happened. She'd seen it before. But this time, she refused to accept it. Margaret sat in a cramped office downtown, staring across the desk at Sarah Green, a sharp-tongued lawyer known for taking on impossible cases. "So, they hired someone less qualified," Sarah said, tapping a pen against her notebook. "And you think it's because of your race?" "I don't think," Margaret replied, her voice steady. "I know." Sarah leaned back, studying her. "If we take this to court, it'll be a fight. People won't like it. Are you ready for that?" Margaret hesitated. She thought about her mother, who'd scrubbed floors so Margaret could go to college. She thought about the students who would never see a teacher who looked like them if she stayed silent. "I'm ready," she said. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through the town. Some neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. Others whispered behind her back. But not everyone turned away. Thomas Blake, a young journalist with a reputation for chasing stories others avoided, knocked on her door one evening. "I want to tell your story," he said simply. Margaret hesitated, but eventually agreed. Thomas's article painted her as more than a victim. It made her a symbol of change. The school board was quick to retaliate. Superintendent Monroe held a press conference, flanked by sympathetic board members. "Our hiring decisions are based solely on merit," he declared, his voice firm. "This lawsuit is nothing but an unwarranted attack on our integrity." Behind closed doors, Monroe seethed. The board's records were subpoenaed, revealing years of hiring decisions that consistently excluded Black candidates. Monroe knew the evidence could destroy him, but he wasn't about to go down without a fight. Meanwhile, Margaret faced her own battles. Threatening letters arrived in her mailbox. Her family begged her to let it go. "You've done enough," her sister pleaded. But Margaret knew stopping now would mean letting them win. The courtroom was packed. Spectators filled every seat, while others stood against the walls. Margaret sat beside Sarah, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across the room, Monroe appeared calm, but his jaw tightened as the judge entered. The trial began with Sarah laying out the case. Margaret was not only the most qualified candidate, but was systematically excluded from consideration due to the color of her skin. Monroe's attorney countered, arguing that the board had acted within its rights. Then came the evidence. Sarah presented hiring records showing a clear pattern. Year after year, white candidates were hired over equally or more qualified Black applicants. Monroe's confident facade began to crack when Sarah cross-examined him. "Mr. Monroe," Sarah said, holding up a document. "This memo, sent by you, states that integrating the faculty too quickly could upset the community.
Could you explain what you meant by that?"
Monroe stammered. "It's taken out of context." The tension in the room was palpable. Spectators exchanged glances. Margaret's heart raced as she watched the superintendent struggle to defend himself. The jury deliberated for only a few hours. When they returned, the foreperson announced the verdict. The school board was guilty of discriminatory practices. Margaret won the case, along with a court order mandating changes to the district's hiring policies. Supporters erupted in cheers, while Monroe slumped in his seat. Margaret felt a wave of relief, but also a bittersweet ache. The victory was hers, but it had come at a cost. Margaret's first day as a teacher was met with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Her students, a diverse group of eager faces, watched as she wrote her name on the board. She turned to them and smiled. "Today, we're going to talk about stories," she began. "Stories shape how we see the world, and sometimes they help us change it." Outside, Thomas Blake's latest article was already making waves. He described Margaret's fight as a turning point for the town and a beacon for others facing similar struggles. Margaret knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But as she stood in that classroom, she felt something she hadn't in months: hope. Margaret's fight wasn't just about one job. It was about opening doors that had been shut for too long. Her courage became a catalyst, inspiring others to stand up, speak out, and believe in the possibility of a better future. What did you think of Margaret's incredible fight for justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How does her story inspire you, and what lessons do you think we can take away from her determination? Subscribe to our channel for soul-stirring stories.